It's very clear, and the Biden administration has now admitted it, that the Haitians are here to stay. They are being dispersed throughout America, and they're not going anywhere, at least not for quite a long time. And in some cases, I think it's pretty clear they're going to stay permanently. Why? Because they're getting these notices to appear in court, typically in 12 months, 24 months, 36 months. And it's a kind of, show up if you show up. And if you don't show up, we're not really going to come looking for you. But we hope you will show up. But in the meantime, of course, you can be here, guest of the United States of America. Wow. It's hard for me to watch this, and in fact to believe that I went through this immigration process, very methodically, step by step. In some ways, looking back, I almost feel like a sucker because I had no money, but I scrounged around some money to get an immigration lawyer. We had to go through the Labor Department, take out ads in the newspaper, go in for multiple interviews. The whole process took years. Eventually, I got a green card, and then it was a slow march to citizenship. Now, think of all these guys who are laughing their heads off because they've just been able to circumvent the process. Now, you might say, well, wait a minute, Dinesh. These are people who are experiencing horrendous violence in their own country. These are people who are refugees. They're fleeing for their lives. First of all, this is not true. The Haitians aren't even coming directly from Haiti. There's been a lot of reporting on this, and it's now a little more clear what's been going on. Some of these people were, in fact, refugees. They were refugees years ago. And what do? They fled from Haiti to other countries, notably Chile and Brazil. They went to Chile and Brazil where they were accepted as refugees. They've been living in those countries for years. But now, under Biden, they see an opportunity. In fact, one of them even said kind of boldly, Biden invited us. And so they see a chance to upgrade their life from a Haitian in Chile or a Haitian in Brazil to a Haitian in America. And so what these guys are doing now is that they are moving from those places. This resolves the mystery of, did the Haitians walk across the ocean? How'd they really get to the Mexican border? Well, the answer is they got to the Mexican border and they got to the Texas border from South America. They didn't actually come from Haiti. And these guys are smart. They realize that the Americans are going to ask for their refugee cards. And so what are they doing? They're cutting them up. In fact, people who have taken a peek on the other side of the border, there's just littered with refugee cards from Chile, refugee cards from Brazil, and I can see pictures of them all over social media. They're just tossed aside. Why? Because if you show up with a refugee card, you're going to have to be sent back because you are now seen as an inhabitant, a resident of this country that has taken you as a refugee. In fact, under immigration law, individuals are not eligible to even apply for refugee status in the U.S. if they're, quote, settled in a third country, which is the case of these Haitians. Now, the reason that they can pull off this scam, the reason that they can cut up their card and show up, I don't have my card, is because the Biden administration is letting them. The Biden administration knows full well what's going on, and yet they have said, kind of look the other way. Let's all engage in the pretense that these are genuine refugees. Let's treat them like refugees. Now, once we began to see all those third world type images of Haitians, bathing in the river and, going to the bathroom under the bridge. It was just this absolute slumdog millionaire type of images. The Biden administration became nervous, not because it was going on, not because they cared about the people who are all sandwiched together, not because of any of that. It was the optics. They were worried about, this is not going to look good. And so they began to try to restrict coverage of how this could be seen by they want to prevent the American people from seeing what they're doing. And then they tried to switch the narrative. the racist horses. The Border Patrol are using whips on the Haitians. Now, again, if they didn't know this was a lie, they found out like 5 minutes later. Why? Because tons of people posted on social media, wait a minute, haven't you ever heard of riding with the long reins? Haven't you heard of reins that are not attached to each other, but attached only to the bit? Don't you know that the Border Patrol uses horses? Border Patrol doesn't carry whips. They aren't whipping anybody. So even though they knew all that, Jen Psaki kind of putting on her kind of most straightest face, she goes, well, those images are highly disturbing. I guess what she's saying is they look like they're being whipped, even though nobody is in fact being whipped. Now, at one point, Mayorkas, chronic liar, by the way, this guy tried to give the impression we're sending the Haitians back. And of course, cooperative media types, there's a flight leaving here, there's a flight leaving there. And yes, a small number of the Haitians, possibly 15, possibly 20%, did go back, were sent back. But Mayorkas has now admitted in an interview with Chris Wallace that, quote, 10 to 12,000 Haitians, and he says, quote, it could be even higher, are here. They're not being sent back. And what this means is that the Biden administration is still doing catch and release. They're not doing remain in Mexico. They're not doing apply from some other country. They're basically acting as if this is a situation in which their interpretive discretion of the law allows them to, in effect, skirt the law. This is kind of the way the left approaches the Constitution. Yes, we're going to interpret the Constitution in a way that to make the Constitution say something completely different from what it in fact says. And let's remember also that these Haitians are now in America, no COVID tests, no vaccine mandates. So the same rules being applied to Americans in all kinds of contexts are not applying to the Haitians. And Jen Psaki says that's because they're not planning to be here for long. What? This is not naivete. I mean, intelligent people don't say things like this unless they intend to deceive. And so you have here a plot that only works because the Biden administration is in on it. They're allowing the Haitians to lie. They're lying. Their officials, Mayorkas and Jen Psaki, are lying. The press is cooperatively lying. And what they're hoping is that the American people sitting in front of their television sets and looking at what's going on or watching it on social media will not figure out the cynical motives behind this orchestrated scheme.